Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 37 of Duke's Download. And my guest today is Stuart Milk, who is the nephew of Harvey Milk and the co-founder and president of the Harvey Milk Foundation. He is with us now, I see. So I'm going to send him a request to join us. Let's see. I'm going to send him a request now. Mr. Milk.
Right, Stuart, please.
So no, seriously, such a honor, really, to talk to you.
Oh, it's great to be with you. It's technology is, I've done like these Instagram lives a few times and I still quite haven't figured them out. So sorry for my stupid question earlier about using MacBook.
Oh no, believe me, it's funny actually because I've always preferred to do Zooms and stuff on the computer, but for some reason they haven't made that possible on Instagram. God knows
Yeah,
why.
that's crazy.
But really, no, it's so good to finally talk to you. I know we've spent years corresponding on social media, but this is a nice change.
Yeah, and I have to ask because I think I sent you a message about when are you running again for public office. So I gotta bug you. Don't let you've run for elected office once, and
Twice now, actually.
oh, is it twice?
So I'm
Okay.
getting close to
Harvey's
Harvey's.
record. Well, yeah, four times the charm.
Well, thank you. I mean, we'll see. I thought I'd give it a little break because considering how crazy politics has been, I was like, let me see how things work out with the 2020 election, and depending on that, we'll. But I feel like hopefully now we're moving in a more stable, more calm direction. So maybe in the not too distant future, we'll see. But the support means a lot. So thank you. I wanted to start at the beginning because I have so many questions for you. But I just wanted to ask, and of course I know a lot of this already. I've followed you for years, but what was the beginning of your story? Because of course I know so many of us know and love your uncle, Supervisor Milk, but what was your story, and sort of how did your story sort of intertwine with his in the beginning of your life?
Yeah, so Harvey was, he was the one who introduced me to what I say the color of life. It was, I still, and probably, the interesting coming from a Jewish family, it was Jesus Christ Superstar that was kind of the seminal moment. Harvey was a co-producer of Jesus Christ Superstar with Tom O'Hargan, the original Broadway version, and he took he invited me and my brother. My brother didn't want to go, so me and my mother went, and it was after Jesus Christ Superstar. He came over and he said, who do you want to go backstage and meet? Do you want to meet Mary Magdalene? Do you want to meet Jesus Christ? And I said, I want to meet King Herod. So I don't know if you know the original Broadway, but King Herod was in drag. So my uncle kind of looked at me and said, aha. And he began this conversation with me about my feeling different, and I did. I mean, I knew even then that I was gay, but I didn't say that to my uncle. I just told him, which was true, that I felt different from everyone. I didn't, the Vietnam War was going on, and I was like obsessed with what we're doing and with people dying. And he's like, hold on to those differences. He says, that's really unique, and it's kind of medicine for the world. You're being different than everyone else. Don't look, be happy that you're different from everyone. And it was really, it was, you have to realize that when my uncle, a couple of years later, ran for public office. I mean, the New York Times, I grew up in the suburbs on Long Island, and the New York Times headline would be "Avowed homosexual runs again." There was nothing positive, and Milk is not a common name. So, people would ask me, am I related to this, to that, they would say faggot in San Francisco. And I'm like, yeah, that's my uncle. And it was really tough because I knew that I was gay. And I was in, as my uncle describes, a brutally homophobic environment that all of us at that in the 1970s had as our norm in school environments and in community environments. There were no out figures. You know, nothing like we have today. And, you know, and even parents, you know, I love the fact that your parents are so supportive of you and they're so public.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we didn't have that then. We didn't have people who were embracing their children even. So, you know, at least not publicly. And so, you know, he was the one person that I could talk to about anything. And interestingly enough, he never brought up the fact, you know, he never asked me, you know, do you like men? Or although he went back to when in San Francisco, he told all his friends that I was gay, and I only
Wow.
learned that after he had been assassinated. But you know, but when I look at our conversations, they were really conversations to be a compass to accepting our full authenticity, whatever that may be.
It's pretty unbelievable. I mean, when you think about, I mean, so wait, how old were you then when the Jesus Christ Superstar thing happened? Were you
I
what?
was 12 then, and
12.
I was
Wow.
14 when he first ran for office. It was a couple of years after that that he moved to San Francisco with Scott and ran for public office first.
Right, because I think his first campaign was 73. Is that right? Yeah. And then 75, yeah, and then 77 was when he won. But so, yeah, I mean, so you already sort of alluded to this, but um, like, especially when you got a little older, like when you were 16, 17, 18, and then I believe you were 18 when he was assassinated. Is that right?
Yeah.
78. So, I mean, especially at the end there, when you were already, close to being an adult, like, were you fully aware of your sexuality by that point? And how did that, work when he became this sort of, global gay rights leader?
Well, you know, and he really wasn't seen as a global gay rights leader even after his election, globally or in the. I mean, he had a global impact because, you know,
Right.
I still have, you know, the London Times headline, you know, openly gay man, or openly homosexual elected in San Francisco. And again, you have to realize that we've had openly gay elected officials before Harvey. There were three, but you know, and with all due respect to them, you know, there was no one who called other people to come out. In fact, most of them said, you know, the fact that I'm gay or lesbian shouldn't be an issue. My uncles would be like, you know, I'm going to talk about it, you know, everywhere. And so, you know, it was really, you know, for me, there was an inspirational aspect of it, but for me personally, it didn't impact me until he was assassinated. And that's when I think most people my age, it had the biggest impact. You know, my uncle's prophetic tape recordings of "Let the bullets that smash through my brain destroy every closet door." I mean, and they destroyed my closet door, even though I was you know, I know that you know who Frank Kameny is. You know, I had when my uncle was assassinated, I was a freshman at American University in DC, and I called Frank's hotline and said, you know, is there a gay bar I can go to that no one will see me go in? And of course there was in DC. The frat house was down an alleyway, and there's nobody unless you were going in that alleyway to go into a gay bar, you would ever go down there. And so, you know, that was the life I was living. And then after he was assassinated, I did come out. And two things happened. One is I probably lost half of my friends because they just never, you know, and clearly they weren't true friends, but they had no experience with it. They believed all the lies and myths and innuendos about gay people because they didn't know LGBT people. And then the second thing was that Joe Sisko, who was the provost at American University, was a former undersecretary of state, called me into his office. And my major was international relations. And he called me into his office, and I thought he was going to give me, you know, I'm sorry to hear about your uncle, whatever. He said, okay. He's like, what do we do now about your major? And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you can't serve in the Foreign Service. You're gay. I've heard you've come out. I have no judgment about that, but you have to choose a new major because it's against the law for someone who's LGBT to serve in the administration, which was the case back then. So that was kind of my experience in coming out. It was both liberating, and then I got to see just how much society was against the act of us being authentic and taking off those masks.
Wow. I mean, it's almost so hard to wrap your head around that while you had this personal But I guess so. What's interesting about it is the way what I gather from what you're saying is that in a way, I mean, yes, he was well known, but despite the fact you were related to this sort of famous, iconic, gay rights leader, that you were still sort of going through. It wasn't like, oh, like within the gay community, like, oh, I'm sort of this, the way you are now, like you're a leader in your own right because of your relation to, in part because of your relation to your uncle. Back then, there really wasn't much prestige. You didn't feel like it wasn't any easier for you in your own life. You were still going through a real struggle, in your own right as a gay man trying to contend with what was going on at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a prestige element with a kind of with a dramatic slant. Not necessarily always the positive slant. I remember going to the first the first anniversary of my uncle's assassination. I was still in school in D.C. and this was a year after he was assassinated, and there was a protest by the AME Church over us remembering Harvey. And that's where I met Maya Angelou. And I was not really, Maya Angelou wasn't I mean, she was a towering figure, but she wasn't a towering figure as she is today.
Right.
And I always wondered why, and she grabbed my hand and she said, "You're the nephew." And she was there to support the memory of Harvey. But it was only afterwards, of many years after that I learned that she was one of my uncle's biggest supporters. I mean, she lived in Oakland. We have records of his contributions, and every single campaign cycle was a check from Maya Angelou. So,
Wow.
there are these, nuggets of, of kind of the prestige that would come. And visionaries like Maya Angelou, I think, would see that in my uncle. But it's certainly, for me, he was simply a member of my family who I could say anything to. He was the only one that told me, that it was important that we cherish our differences. And my parents wanted to be loving. My mother in particular would say, "You'll outgrow these differences." And my uncle would be like, "No, no, no, you never want to outgrow them."
Wow. Wow. And I first came to know you or know of you from when I think I was 17 at the time, when I saw you receiving the Medal of Freedom from President Obama. And I remember watching it on YouTube, and I was just curious. I know this is then many years after in the future, but how did your journey evolve over that time between like the 80s and then to 2009, and then what was that experience like? Because I just remember what an iconic moment for you to be there and receive it on your uncle's behalf.
Yeah, that was a surreal moment. I mean, there's so many stories about that day. But one of the most important was the fact that the class of Presidential Medal of Freedom recipients all respected Harvey. And when Desmond Tutu, Kara Kennedy was there accepting on behalf of her uncle, of her father, Ted, who was still alive, but he was too sick to go. Mm-hmm. And Desmond Tutu, there's this clutch, so a presidential clutch, and you're in the residence with the president and the first lady and the other Medal of Freedom recipients, and only me and Kara were the only two accepting on behalf of someone. Wow. And so it was kind of a surreal moment. There's Sidney Poitier, there's Sandra Day O'Connor, there's Desmond Tutu, there's Dr. Stephen Hawking. I mean, it was this surreal moment. And Desmond Tutu turns to Kara and says, "I love what you do with the foundation for your uncle, and for both of your uncles, and that you're active in that." And he turns to me and he says, "And what are you doing? Why isn't there a Harvey Milk Foundation?" And he was the one who challenged that. And then I turned and I said, well, I kind of heard my uncle's voice, and I said, "Well, will you help?" And he said yes. And Nancy Brinker, who was getting Medal of Freedom, said she'd help, and Kara Kennedy said she'd help, and even Cheetah Rivera said she'd help. So so that was really one of those amazing moments. And then when you watch the video, you may have seen the president And he didn't do this with many of the other recipients, but he was whispering in my ear a couple of times, President Obama. And so, you know, one of those comments I'll keep private, but one of them, the first one he said is that now the press are going to ask you, what did the president whisper in your ear? And your response is, if the president wanted the press to, or anyone else to know, he wouldn't have whispered. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that is not the very point. That's why he's whispering, exactly. But no, I mean that, and by the way, that is so perfect, Harvey. Like, of course, it's like if someone says, "Well, I support what you're doing," it's like, "Well, will you help me? Will you? Will you? Will you?" I love that you took the opportunity, and so that was the impetus then to start the foundation.
Yeah, and I mean, and he's been Desmond Tutu in particular has given wise advice. I mean, he warned me at the time. He said, "Look," he said, "you know, whatever you do, there's going to be slings and arrows coming for you in all directions. Just keep on what you're doing." He says, he says, they're going to hit you from the left, they're going to hit you from the right, they're going to hit you from below, and they're going to hit you from above. And he said, you know, just expect that, and don't let it phase you. And that has been true.
Well, absolutely. No, I mean the work you've done is incredible. And maybe you could, for those who don't already know, maybe you can share a little bit about, you know, what the organization or what the foundation has been doing since its inception.
Yeah, so we do work around Harvey's legacy in the U.S. That's pretty much, we don't, you know, we've got wonderful organizations in the U.S. that are doing work on policy, that are doing work for elected officials. Most of our focus is global, and there's a reason for that, but and there's a need for that. But you know, for over a decade now, we focused on emerging and struggling LGBT communities around the world, where we don't have out role models, where we try to work in countries where it's still illegal to be LGBTQ. It's criminal. And then countries where, you know, we've got, you know, the first modern country to decriminalize homosexuality, Turkey. There's still honor killings that go on there today. So there's no societal acceptance. And those honor killings are not prosecuted. They're not looked into. So, you know, as much successes that we have, and we need to celebrate them, and I think gay marriage is a huge portion of that success, we still have a majority of the world where it's either unacceptable or it's illegal to be LGBT, where a majority of the world's population live, and we can't just leave them behind. So a lot of the work that we do is global. I have been to over 60 nations, and we don't, you know, we have a saying: we don't do anything without them. We don't do anything. We don't go anywhere that we're not invited. We don't call someone up and say, "Look, you guys need help." We wait for someone to reach out to us, and they usually reach out to us when they have, you know, they haven't been successful in getting any other organization to help them. And that, I think, channels my uncle too. I remember his last TV interview before he was assassinated was Good Morning San Francisco, and the host said to him, you know, "Harvey, people said we shouldn't have had you on. You know, we tried to have so and so and tried, and we couldn't get them, and you know, we were left with you." And he said, "Okay, well, let's talk about the issues. I know I wasn't your first choice." So we kind of, when we're not people's first choice, we feel kind of that we're channeling Uncle Harvey in that too. But it's, you know, it's been a privilege and honor to work across the world with LGBT elected officials and out individuals, and I would say predominantly young people who are standing on the shoulders of my uncle and everyone who's come before them, and who are proclaiming their authenticity and their right to exist. And many of them have lost their lives. One of the things that we do at the foundation is we try to honor the activists that have lost their lives that we have worked with in our awards gala that we do every year. But that is the main focus of what we do, because we believe that it's in all of our self-interest that nobody is diminished or marginalized because of who they are, because of the language they speak, because of the faith they are, because of their sex or their gender identity, because of the color of their skin, because of their ethnicity. All of those elements go into the global human rights work, and it's all shared, and there's an intersectionality with them all.
It's really, really funny that you bring that word up, because literally the next topic that I wanted to discuss was, it literally says, discuss issue of intersectionality, because and I was thinking about it, but both internationally, but also more like on a domestic front, because, and I actually talked to Cleve Jones about this. I spoke to him for one of my interviews last year, and one thing that I felt was really important leading up to the 2020 election was the issue of, or as Harvey would used to call it, the us's, and the idea that the only way that we would achieve not only just win the election, but build a coalition to achieve progressive change is by bringing all the various different communities together, whether it's LGBTQ plus, women, labor workers, African Americans, Latino community. That the only way that we achieve change is not by treating each other as different separate groups, but by actually coming together. And I think that idea is really a big reason why I think we won, why Biden won the election, because we all just said, okay, everyone needs to be all hands on deck kind of strategy. But I wanted to get your perspective, given what's happening in the news right now with BLM and Dante Wright, who was just murdered at the hands of a police officer. Like, how do you see the whole issue of intersectionality, in terms of a lot of the other social justice issues out there right now?
Well, I mean, so, having this perspective of working abroad, where we've had people like Victor Ubin and Marie Le Pen and Duda in Poland, we have these people who divide and conquer. And it's a 1930s playbook, 1930s Europe playbook. And so I think it's important for us to realize that, that the role of public figures and the role of national leaders. And so, I mean, and I'm going to lay this on the doorstep of Donald Trump and the Trump administration, but the people like him who verbalize this, this divide and conquer mentality. And it brings about more division, and it brings about lack of unity. And so I think, we got, Joe Biden is certainly somebody who is actively working to bring the country together to heal, but we still have this voice out there. And we still have voices out there that are attracted to division. And we have to counter message that. I mean, it's important that, not just the Black Lives Matter movement, but what's going on with the attack on our Asian brothers and sisters and non-gender conforming. I mean, we all of these issues are LGBTQ issues. I remember the first interview I did on MSNBC after Donald Trump got elected I think it was Lawrence O'Donnell that asked me, well, Donald Trump says he's for the LGBTQ community. And I said, well, you can't be anti-Mexican and be for the LGBT community because we are Mexican. You can't be anti-women because we are women. You can't be, anti-immigrant because we are immigrant. We are all of these communities. And so when you stand up for anyone who's being marginalized and diminished because they're a minority, because they have a different faith, because they have a different color skin, because they come from a different ethnicity, we are being attacked. And so it's really important to point out these bullies. And my uncle talked to me once about the bullies on the playground, or in the school system. And he asked me, I remember when I told him that I felt so different, he said, the bullies only win if we all together let them. And it's true when bullies are either on a school playground or if they have something like, Pennsylvania Avenue. They only win if we let them, and we can't let them win.
There was a quote, actually. I actually wasn't, forgive me, I'm going to pick up my phone for a second because I'm going to see if I can find it. I mean, maybe I don't need to pull up the full quote, but there was a quote I remember that I actually reposted of Harvey's after, I reposted it at the height of last summer during the George Floyd protests. But it was a quote that was so pertinent to that moment, and talking about how it's them that tries to divide us and say that it's them that are tearing down that are tearing down our community centers and building developing and tearing down but basically the sense that Blacks, Asians, Latinos, that we are fighting this common enemy, and that they're trying to basically divide us amongst each other instead, because they know that if we come together and we're fighting fascism, and we're fighting, you know, police brutality and just hate, you know, in general. That, you know, if we're coming together, that there's no way we can lose. And I remember it was such a, it was almost like gave me chills reading it, because I was like, wow, he really, even 45 years ago, really hit the nail on the head in terms of, you know, what we're dealing with today. It's the same thing, really. But I wanted to ask you about President Biden, because I know that you have a history with him, and that he's, you know, I saw the Joe Biden account follows you on Instagram. Like, do you have a relationship with him? Like, what has your history with him been like in the past?
Well, you know, we did some great work with Vice President Biden when he was
Right.
in the Obama administration, and he's hosted a couple events, including the first global LGBT movement event at the Vice President's residence.
Wow.
And it's a great honor that he follows me. But to be honest with you, you know, it was a no-brainer to support him, and I did so very early on, because I really did feel that that a President Biden and at his side, I always get teased that I always mention Dr. Biden, but you know, it's a team, and they're really authentic and real if you talk to them in person, and and I think that there's something, you know, that cuts across some of the BS that the other side puts out there when you have them out and talking in the community, like today, you know, just bending down and picking up, you know, at the police officers memorial, you know, the toy that this police officer's little girl had dropped. You know, I mean, he's just very authentic, very real, and I think that resonates good for the world. And he's very astutely aware of, you know, it was, you know, I always mention to people, yes, President Obama did tremendous amount of work to make marriage equality happen, but it was really the slip of the tongue of Joe Biden that got that started. You know, when he got well ahead of then President Obama in supporting marriage equality. I mean, this was a no-brainer for President Biden, and I think that that there is a lot that we will see, but you know, I do worry, because we still have this other voice out there. I mean, yes, you know, it's been cut off from some social media, but I worry that there are people that still, for some reason, are attracted to that darkness. And we've seen this around the world. So you mentioned about my uncle and about him talking about these things that are relevant. He was really a student of World War II. I mean, it impacted our family as a Jewish family. He just could never understand how a community could return so brutally against members of their own community.
Yep.
And you know, it was in his mind, he just could not get over the fact that, you know, that this institutionalized and culturalized genocide would, you know, people either look the other way or bought into it. And I think, you know, he really wanted to make sure that the lessons weren't forgotten. And it's really very omniscient of him, because look at what we face with today. I mean, we have this backlash in Europe. We have, you know, this ultra-right nationalist movement that, and by the way, it's throughout Europe. I mean, it may have been centered in Hungary, and you know, you've got Poland taking away the right of the Constitutional Court to interpret the Constitution, LGBT free zone set up, but the Roma community has been, you know, has had their rights taken away in countries. You have what was the Northern League, that's now the League in Italy, that is just as ultra right as the Jobbik and the Fitz party in Hungary, and so, you know, I think it's really important that we look at this not just from a national standpoint, but from a global standpoint. And we have to stand together and talk about it. It's not enough to simply say, you know, okay, we won an election.
Right.
We have to all do something. And, you know, and if that means supporting, you know, our brothers and sisters who are not LGBTQ, but who are being attacked and being marginalized, then we have to make sure our voices are heard. You know, if you're lucky enough to live in one of the bubbles, you know, that you have the majority of your rights and you feel protected and you can marry the person you love and you can put that person's picture on your desk in the morning, you know, after you got married, and not be fired or not lose your housing. That's great, but that you don't get to keep that when the rest of the country and the rest of the world don't have that.
Yep.
And so it's really important that we keep, you know, that we keep the mantle moving forward, and we don't have to all agree on everything. You know, this is another, that last video of the last interview of my uncle that Juana did on Good Morning San Francisco. It's great because, you know, one of the questions he was asked is, you know, some people, you know, say, Harvey, that you're too left and you're too right. He says, I know. He says, the left think I'm too right, the right think I'm too left. I'm square dab in the middle. I'm an old-fashioned Harry Truman Democrat, he said, and the left don't like me and the right don't like me. And so, I mean, we don't have to agree on everything, but we do need to agree on basic human rights and non-diminishment of people, and the fact that we should be celebrating all of our differences. You know, I sometimes take issue with the fact that there's more that we have in common than our differences. I know that that's a common phrase that people like to use. I understand it feels good, but I keep channeling my uncle saying our differences are meant to be celebrated. We don't need to marginalize our differences. We don't need to diminish our differences. We don't need to say, okay, we have these differences, but our commonality is more important. No, our differences make us all stronger, and it makes this world more vibrant. I mean, think about it. If, you know, if everybody was the same color, if every plant was the same color, I mean, you know, how boring of a world it would be. The fact that we have differences is really a strength, and we should be celebrating them. I love our commonality, that's good, but I love our differences more. I can learn from our differences much more than I can learn from someone who is exactly like-minded as me.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful way, but it's true. It's like diversity and difference is exactly what makes this world so special and so, you know, beautiful. You know, in closing, I wanted to ask you about Harvey Milk Day, because obviously that's coming up next month, May 22nd. Obviously with COVID, I know, you know, things are different. Normally there would be, you know, like last year, you know, I know a lot of your programming and had to be virtual, but like what is planned for this year, given that things are maybe slightly more open than they were last year?
Well, we got a great event coming up with EQCA. So, you know, I'm on the board of EQCA. So even though I don't live in California, that's going to be online. WeHo is doing, I mean, I can't go through the whole list, but one of the things that I could put out there, I know that I was asked if I could play, WeHo's doing Dear Harvey, which is a play written by Patricia Lowry about people impacted by my uncle, including Cleve and Anne and myself. And I was asked if I could play my part, the part of myself. And there was a scheduling conflict. So I'm going to put it out there, since you're connected with WeHo, that you play the part of me. And
that's a great idea.
You're available on May 22nd. They're doing it live online. So
that's a great idea.
You know, that's like, I'm channeling my uncle too. He's like, put out a challenge to someone when people.
I would be beyond thrilled. That would be an honor. Seriously.
Well, we'll connect you with the folks putting that on.
I was going to ask, should I reach him? No, that would be great. I would love to, that would be a thrill. I would love it. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a great play. It's very moving.
I've seen it before. I've seen it. So no, I look forward to it. That's great. But no, that's awesome. And so for those of you who want to see or donate to the foundation and learn more, it's milkfoundation.org. And Stuart, seriously, I'm so grateful. Really, thank you for doing this.
No, thank you for everything you do. And don't forget, I'm looking forward to your next campaign.
Thank you so much. And talk soon. Hopefully
Yes.
meet in person one day soon, once
Yes.
COVID's over. So,
Absolutely.
thank you. Bye.